Welcome to In the Garden. Good morning, or good afternoon, I guess. I'm Robin Hanna, your moderator and a Montgomery County Master Gardener, and our experts here with me today are Donna Evans from Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection and Stephen P. Dubick, the coordinator of Montgomery County Master Gardeners with the University of Maryland Extension. Some of the services Master Gardeners provide include our speakers group, demonstration gardens, the youth gardening programs, therapeutic horticulture, many special events, including the popular Ask a Master Gardener, to name a few. Today, our presenter, Donna Evans, will talk about maintenance of stormwater practices on public property. Donna?
Thank you, Robin. I'm going to share my screen and get started with the presentation. So thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. I do work for Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection. I'm in the stream restoration division. I wanted to start out just to give you a little background, though, on what environmental site design is. So these are small-scale vegetative, stormwater practices integrated throughout the site as close to the source as possible. And they're meant to slow down stormwater, spread it out and let it soak in gradually, filtering the water, mimicking pre-construction natural hydrology. It's actually a regulation that's in place from the Maryland Department of Environment, and it was enacted in 2010. So anytime there's new construction, they have to go through permitting and try to meet this requirement. It's called ESD to the MEP, which is environmental site design to the maximum extent practicable. So here's an example. So this is North Potomac Recreation Center. This is a site that we maintain regularly. There are 9 bioretention practices and 4 sections of green roofs. We assign asset numbers to each of these practices in order to release work orders to maintain them. And some sites have also pervious pavement included. So what I do is I'm the program manager, and I manage the maintenance of BMP practices, which is best management practices, on public property of environmental site design. So what I do manage is bioretention. These are larger facilities that have a lot of structural components, rain gardens and green streets. You see these in our local neighborhoods, as well as tree boxes in the right-of-way, green roofs, and pervious concrete and permeable pavers. So without ESD, which interrupts stormwater before it gets to our storm drain, what we have is untreated stormwater running off roofs and lawns and driveways, carrying pollutants and chemicals right into our storm drains, into our local waterways. So here's some examples of the pollutants that get carried off. I like to bring up the thermometer because the water running off these pervious surfaces is actually heated up, and then it enters our streams warmer than our streams are used to. So it does impact the habitats. A huge component of BMP practices is vegetative, which is native plants and specialized soils. So they work integrally together to filter out these pollutants. So native plants offer a deep root system. It absorbs more water, and the soil aids in the uptake of excess nutrient runoff. They provide wildlife habitat, and the specialized soils help filter out pollutants. So you can use these ESD practices on a residential scale too. This is an interesting picture here on the top left. So those are 2 rain gardens. The one along the fence line is actually interrupting stormwater coming off from the neighbor's property. So we call that lot-to-lot drainage. And so that rain garden would intercept that stormwater. And when the rain garden got full, it would gradually spill over into that lawn space. The second rain garden is being fed by that downspout, this is an interesting design where there was like a dry stream bed that fed that stormwater into the second rain garden. The lower left is another approach that's sort of very low tech, but kind of artsy. So you have a rain chain coming off the gutter into a little dry stream bed, and a decorative bridge and some native plants. And on the right, this is a really good tool in your toolbox. These are called check dams, and they can be soil, but rock helps to do a better job. So what it does is it creates like their step pools or trips that stormwater up as it moves through the site and slows it down. And then you plant behind or in between these check dams so that those plants do that continual stormwater help by soaking up that water. So we have a lot of resources on our website. So please check that out, including these informative maintenance sheets that relate to each type of practice. And so it's a really good resource if you have any of these practices on how to maintain that. So that is a brief introduction to what I do. If you have any questions, my information is here. Email me. Rather do email than cell phone, but if you need to, you can definitely give me a call as well. So actually, this is a picture of the Holiday Park Senior Center. I know there was a question coming up about a different area of that community center, but we retrofitted it to a more landscape appeal. So stormwater can be attractive as well. Stormwater management can be attractive as well. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Donna. I think all of us are affected by all of this, and I know that there are probably lots of questions that'll come in, but I'm going to ask a question for everybody, I guess, in advance. What are some of the challenges you face in meeting these environmental site design, ESD practices?
Well, from a maintenance standpoint, low maintenance is like number one to important for these practices to be sustainable over time. And there's been a bit of a disconnect, I would say, with sound horticultural practices and planting plan specifications. And that's increased maintenance burdens. So some of the examples here would be, for instance, the designer, it'd be very beneficial if they did a site visit prior to plant selection. If there's deer pressure or salt and sediment load, I mean, that really does drive the plant choice. But we have seen some situations where plants have been installed and then the deer have come. So that's like critical. Weed seed soil environment from the beginning and maintained throughout, because what we're seeing also are these sites are installed, but not maintenance wasn't thought of on a regular basis. So weeds then grew adjacently and seeded the BMP. And right then you have a weed seed contaminated situation, and it's very hard to overcome that. Initial plant size. So these are all planting schedule issues. Like you really need to start with larger plants and space closer together, include a ground cover layer. So our goal is that these plantings would grow in over time, hopefully within a year or two, and cover that soil to choke out any weed pressure and help with all that water absorption. But we also don't want it to overgrow. So understanding plant growth habits is just another part to that puzzle. You might select dwarf cultivars in these smaller footprints of BMPs. So that's a whole big issue that we've actually done a lot of outreach to the community about. The only other thing I would say is that the workforce development has been a challenge in the past, I'd say more so. So it's educating professionals to do this kind of work so that they can identify native plants and weeds and understand how to do the BMP maintenance. But I have seen actually a huge improvement in that regard with the opportunities, the educational opportunities that are out there.
Well, that's a long answer. No, it's a long answer, but it's very helpful. And you said one thing that I think is just clear and is something we all remember and need to work on is planning in advance and coming to you and your department with questions that help us out and set us on that right path. Thanks. I hope you'll stick around and help us answer some other questions coming up. I want to tell everyone listening in, please contact us if you have any gardening questions or questions regarding any of the programs we've mentioned, Donna's mentioned, Steve will mention, or any questions on anything on our brand new Montgomery County Master Gardener website. You can post questions now if you're listening in the comment section, and please remember to include your email in case we will need to follow up. Also, you can view previously answered questions from In the Garden on YouTube. If we can we look at our new website now and look at some of those things, or should we do that a little later, Bev?
I think we can just go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, since our last program 2 weeks ago, we've received quite a few questions. I'm going to start with a question for Steve on cabbage moth control. It seems that cabbage moths have eaten all my cabbage leaves and even some of the jalapeno pepper leaves. I saw them flying around, just a few of them, but what am I our questioner asked, what am I looking forward to prevent damage and attack those cabbage moths to beat them?
Okay. Well, it's kind of tough now. There's at least 3 different kinds of caterpillars that feed on that kind of group of plants, the cabbage, the cruciferous. So the big thing is exclusion, and that's usually like a floating row cover. So once they're in there, once the female has laid her eggs in there, that's kind of tough. Now you're the point where you're doing detection, very often hand squishing. You can drop them in soapy water, something like that. But the trick with those things is they're very close to an appearance to the leaf that they're feeding on. So they're a little hard to see. One of the things that gives them away, actually 2 things. One is the chewing and also their excrement. You'll see little piles of their excrement underneath there. So if you're going to start any, let's say, cruciferous here in the fall, I know it's a ways away, but think about getting a row cover. But by then, right now, it might be kind of hard because after the fact, you could use some insecticides, but we have some softer types of insecticides. We can use BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. That's an organic type of pesticide. There's pyrethrin, which is naturally chemical extracted from chrysanthemum plants. You could use those, but a lot of it right now, probably at this stage of the game, I would probably do the detective work and try to find them and squish them, and then try to use the row cover for next time.
All right, that's great. And I guess a lot of these BT and all of these, if people are picking them up, they'll be told in Montgomery County what the rules and regulations are on how to use them.
Yeah, they should always read the label and follow that. There's often sometimes on the label, sometimes people forget about it. There'll be something called days to harvest. Once you apply it, you have to wait, so many days. So make sure you read that too. So, and some of these products don't maybe kill quite as quickly as you like. And the time you spray it, you see them. I'm just thinking, Robin, you could have gone down and squished it, Anyway.
Well, thanks.
So, yeah.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you. Our next question is on some diseased hydrangeas. What has happened to my neighbor's hydrangeas? Are mine in danger? I have an oak leaf hydrangea about 16 feet away across the driveway, and a lace cap hydrangea about 25 feet away. What do you think, Steve? What caused this damage?
Well, this year we noticed a lot more like leaf spotting on hydrangeas. And so we have several kinds of species of hydrangeas. In each of those species of hydrangeas have different varieties of cultivars. And some will be more susceptible than others. So we have that. So the genetic side and the environment seems to be conducive for this leaf spot. And on top of that, we have fungal leaf spot and we have bacterial leaf spot, which look very, very similar. So if you go to that route, if you want to spray, you want to make sure that you've narrowed it down whether it's fungal or bacterial. And it's not always easy. It's even for experts. And a lot of these things, they look similar. So if you go with that route, you may want to use a fungicide that has copper in it That will give you some relief if it is a bacterial leaf spot. But if you may want to take a second and back it up, that you probably may be able to manage to a point by doing this sort of the basic things for disease prevention. If you have really badly blighted leaves, remove those, increase the amount of air circulation, allow more light from above, maybe thin the tree canopy, something like that. Don't water overhead. And I hate to say it, if you have like 5 or 6 hydrangeas, and one of them's looking pretty rough, you just might want to let that one go. Just let that one go. That one just maybe a little more successful, maybe not best for our area here. That's my thoughts.
I think that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, our next question. Let's see. Gardening in wet soil. So, Donna, glad you're here. It's about a garden at the Holiday Park Senior Center, which you referred to at the end of your presentation. Our questioner is saying, I'm trying to use the hugelkultur bed approach and layer and mound up the soil. Might this approach work for other wet soils? Any advice for gardening in wet soils? Don, I'm gonna talk a little about hugelkultur, and then I'm gonna ask you to help out. Hugelkultur, no dig raised beds with a difference. They hold moisture, build fertility, maximize surface volume, and are great spaces for growing fruit, vegetables, and herbs. Hugelkultur, the word itself, means hill culture or hill mound. It's literally a raised garden bed that is built from the bottom up. The advantages of these hugel beds are many, including gradual decay of wood as a consistent source of long-term nutrients for the plants. A large bed might give out a constant supply of nutrients for 20 years, or even longer if you use only hardwoods. The composting wood also generates heat, which should extend the growing season. Soil aeration increases as those branches and logs break down, meaning the bed will be no-till long-term. The logs and branches act like a sponge. Rainwater is stored and then released during drier times, like droughts that we're in. Actually, you may never need to water your hugel bed, depending, I guess, on after the first year and where you are, except maybe during some long-term droughts. Donna, what can you add about this with the wet soils and gardening in those areas?
So I think that's just a super cool approach. I've never actually tried it myself, but it makes sense from a lot of horticultural standpoints. What I could offer is some ideas if you want more of an ornamental garden, and you have a wet area in your yard. So there are some native plants that we use in stormwater that really do well in these sort of saturated soil environments for, we like these sites to drain within 48 hours, preferably. So like Iris versicolor is like one of my go-tos in a sunny area. The juncus would be another opportunity, good plant there. And a lot of our carex species. In a shady area, one of our go-to plants for ground cover is called pacora or senecio, a ragwort. It's a no-brainer. That plant just really likes those wet areas in the shade. It can handle some sun if it's in a more moist environment. So some of the practices that homeowners might be able to use, and I know this is a reoccurring problem of lot-to-lot drainage, where you have water coming from your uphill neighbors that traverse through your yard. It's not a good probably place for a rain garden because you can't size it. You just don't know what the impervious surface load is. But you could use that tool of check dams. So using this stone sort of smiley faces or, half circles going throughout your space that you have this issue with and planting in between those check dams. So it's a way to create, or, incorporating a dry stream bed with check dams. So that's kind of an artsy look, which is cool. River birch, magnolia virginiana. These are also larger trees that help absorb that stormwater. And for a really, if you had an excessive slope, you could go to a more structural practice where you might do a raised bed with an under drain so that the water would drain through a planter, let's say. And then maybe that under drain would daylight on your property, not your neighbor's property, into another planted area. And that could happen more than once. And that is called a treatment drain. So that's kind of fun. So just another spin on it there, Robin.
There's a lot of creative ways to handle it. It's not just to come dry. Thank you. That's great. Very helpful. Thanks. Okay, our next question is about a rhododendron that is not thriving. Our questioner wants to know, what is happening to my rhododendron? It is not sitting in sitting water. But only a few flowers came up this year. Steve, what do you think happened?
That's really hard to say specifically, and what's happened here, but it's probably maybe an aggregate, a number of things going on there. The plant seems to be an older plant. It seems to, losing its vigor. It could be a combination of things, and that's what I'm speculating. So really, probably the best thing to do is to get a site visit, or additional information, or sometimes even people have done this. They've taken their phone and shown me a little video, and they're going around, and sometimes you just pick up things from there. One of the things I've noticed on some of the plant materials, some of our native plant materials, azaleas and trees and things around here the last several years, and this is myself, I'm just speculating on this, is that we're seeing some decline. We're calling oak decline. I've seen a number of azaleas and sometimes some rhododendrons, and some of this occurs naturally. But we are seeming to having more periods of really where we get intense wetness and there's dryness. So some plant materials, maybe where they're sited, aren't doing well. They can't adapt to that site because the limited amount of water that it can hold, and they're getting tested. So they're just kind of slowly declining. So, what can the person do? They could get a soil test. There's always a good idea to get that. But since it's existing plant material, I'm not sure how much new information will pick up from that. So if they can, they may be getting excessively shaded there. So that's one thing. Again, it kind of goes back to thinning the canopy, raising the canopy, increasing the amount of light. Rhododendrons don't respond back to heavy pruning as well as azaleas. You could thin some of the shoots down to kind of bring it back down over time. But overall, it just looks like it's not getting the vigor there. You could use a moderate application of a slow release fertilizer in the fall or the very late winter. That might help a little bit, maybe, reinvigorate the plant a little. But it's kind of hard to tell from that situation. But it's a very common thing to see on, because it's a little more challenging unless the rhododendrons, unless you have if you have a good site, that's great. I think this is all going back to the site.
Right plant, right place, and all that. Mm-hmm. A related question for you, Steve, is also on azaleas, again related to rhododendron. In this picture, what is wrong with this azalea?
Okay, this has got an interesting kind of little foliar leaf gall. It's called exobasidium. So this type of fungus shows up early in the year, and that type of fungus, that type of gall, gets onto other plants too. Another common plant that gets this type of galls, camellias. And it's also, as I mentioned earlier on, a lot of these diseases are very cultivar dependent. You might have several different plants, and probably that exobasidium leaf gall will continually show up on that one or two plants that you normally see. It might spread to others, but probably have a favorite. You can hand pick them off when they're small. When you have a few of them, going by, sometimes it gets excessive, and then again, you may want to think about removing that plant. We don't have any effective fungicide treatment, so that's not going to give you any relief on that. But most part, it's just a nuisance. Most of the time, it's just a nuisance. Not a big worry. Just go for what you got. But sometimes, if it seems excessive, some people it's unattractive. I get it. Then you may want to get a really bad. Look for another variety, maybe to replace it. But it's usually not life-threatening. It's more of an aesthetic issue. Occasionally it gets severe, but most of the time you can live with it.
All right, thanks. So, next question. What is wrong with my columbine leaves? How can I control the damage? So these blotches and tunnels on these leaves, I guess you all are looking at the picture. The lines in these leaves are caused by leaf miners feeding on the tissue of the leaf, creating a mine as it goes. Leaf miners are unlikely to cause serious damage to the plant. It's more aesthetic, and really the way to control it, I guess, is you hand pick. Everyone knows I'm excited about this. Leaf miners and the leaves. You can take off the leaves, take those miners as you see them in the little making tracks. You literally, as Steve said before about one of the other pests, you can crush them. And you need to remove and dispose of those affected leaves as soon as you see them starting. And the female leaf miner lays eggs in the leaf, and that's why you're going to be going in, stopping them, crushing them, and getting rid of them. As we said, it's not necessarily serious, but it certainly lowers the aesthetic value of the plant. And anyone who loves to do this might be a good time to talk about what we learn and what we can do in the Master Gardener program. Once I learned some of these things and started looking at plants and finding them, and I'd identify something, I know I personally enjoy doing, going and taking a look at the leaf and finding out what's going on. Steve, tell us more about the Master Gardener program. When can people enroll? When can they start taking these classes?
Oh, sure, Robin. Yeah, I'd be happy to tell you about that. Montgomery County, we do our training program once a year. We do it in the winter months. This last year, because of COVID, we went online. We'll probably follow the same format again. And so what we do is we collect the names and addresses of folks. We send out a letter beginning of November. If anyone is interested, we go over the particulars, the days, and so forth, the cost. And we tell you a little bit more about the program. But it'll probably be about 4 or 5 weeks in the middle of winter, probably be online during the day. The goal is to train volunteers to help disseminate horticulture information to the residents of Montgomery County on safe, effective practices in managing their garden. And we do this a variety of ways, including here today in the garden. We have a speakers group, we have demonstration gardens, we have newsletters, we have a therapeutic horticulture program, and other programs too. So we're always looking for volunteers, and hopefully if there's anyone interested in there, contact us and we'll put you on the mailing list. Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Steve. It's definitely a worthwhile thing to do. All of you listening and who are interested, this is a great thing to do. Our next question is on rudbeckia dying. Why are these plants dying, and what can I do to stop the problem? Our questioner asks.
Okay.
Steve, you want to tell us a little bit about that? Sure.
So it looks like you got a stalk borer on a rudbeckia, and there's a couple different kinds. I don't know which one it is. It could be the European corn stalk borer. So it's kind of interesting. You normally think of, vegetable pests staying on vegetable plants, but sometimes they cross over. Now that's not a native caterpillar, but we do have a native stalk borers. I don't know who's in there. So if you really wanted to know, we'd have to get the little creature out of there, and we'd have to get it down to one of our folks, extension specialists for the University of Maryland, to identify. But it probably works the same way. Down right below that hole, if you cut into it, you'll probably see a caterpillar. And that caterpillar, after it feeds, will probably pupate there and then emerge. Whether they have 1 generation a year or 2 generations a year, I'm not sure. So sanitation would be the best thing. Cut right below it, close to the ground. You've already lost that shoot anyway. There's a good chance the plant can come back. Maybe next year. You might even try to put some growth a little later on. But destroy that. And when you're there, open it up. Take a look. See if it's there. See if anybody's home. So, and then you have your options on what you want to do. Whether you want to squish it, Robin, or you want to relocate it. I don't know which one to do. We have to figure that out.
We'll find out. We'll discuss. Okay, thanks, Steve. All right, our next question, and see the photo, is on a crooked leader on a sweet bay magnolia. So our questioner has a sweet bay magnolia that they netted to protect against the cicadas, and the new growth hardened off while it was netted, and now it's crooked. These shoots are the main leader of the 2-year-old tree. Should I prune these off, or will that further deform how the tree will grow, since it would be cutting off the main stem? Is there a way to straighten them? Thanks. Well, sometimes you can help a bent leader branch get upright again. I would not cut the branch at this time. It's a new tree, only 2 years old. Cutting off the main leader does not seem like a good way to do pruning to me. I think we have a general rule. You wait usually as close to 3 years as you can, and 2 is short. So the tree was also only netted for a short period of time, I assume. So the branch may just be young enough to become upright with a little bit of help from you at home. You can try using 2 stakes on either side of the tree and tie the leader, gently tie the leader in an upright position to keep it steady. The tie should allow the leader to move in the wind. Another way of doing this is by gradually pulling it, going in and checking on it occasionally and tying it to a metal stake a little bit each day. But again, be very careful not to damage the trunk with wire or pull the wire through, do anything too strong to it. And you can put the wire through a piece of rubber hose to buffer the point of contact so it doesn't rub against the tree. I think that I think you'll be okay with that. I think give it a chance, and if in another year you have a problem with it, you can do a little bit more pruning after the 3rd year, I think. Anything to add on that, Don or Steve? Or okay?
I think so.
All right.
Great.
Then we have some questions on spots on a yellow buckeye. What is causing this yellow buckeye to get spotted and the underside to turn red? It has been covered for several weeks with the cicada netting. The nearby Virginia sweet spire, which is on the last picture, appears to be suffering from the same spots. Please advise how to spot the offender. Do you need a magnifying glass? How close do you need to get? And what time of year to look for them? They were not noticed until this week, and I guess this is relatively current in time, so you can still see in the photograph some of the netting that's there. Well, the yellow buckeye is most likely suffering from Gardenia leaf blotch. Is that right, Steve? Is that how you'd say that? Anything close to what you'd say?
Well, most of us, we just call it the blotch.
Okay,
blotch.
the blotch. The blotch. Caused by the fungal pathogen, Guarneria Azalea. And a common problem for this tree species is detailed on our extension websites. The University of Minnesota and Massachusetts have covered this, and I think you can find out about the blotch pretty easily. It is difficult to see on the picture through the netting in the first couple of photographs, but the key symptoms of this disease, as we can see are the irregularly shaped reddish-brown blotches with a yellow border and black centers that have developed along the leaf veins. Blotches that reach a certain size and then stop developing, so that in general the foliage is retained for the growing season, although photosynthetic capacity and hence the growth may be reduced. The leaves will curl and become deformed around those spots and reddish spots on the leaf pedicels. So the Virginia sweet spire in the final photograph there exhibits similar symptoms, although the chlorosis is more severe and extends almost across the entire leaf surface. Yellow buckeye prefers a fairly neutral pH range, whereas the Virginia sweet spire requires a more acidic soil, suggesting that the soil pH may be too high for the latter, resulting in this lack of available iron. In addition, those black spots on the sweet spire appear to be relatively larger than those on the buckeye, probably because the plant is stressed by the nutritional imbalance. I think we don't want to use fungicides for this, do we? I don't think so. I think we're going to be I think we talked about microenvironments, and the leaf spots also come from this netting. Removing the netting and letting this plant go on, breathe, and transpire for the next year ought to help bring it back to life. Any other thoughts? Cicadas, Brudex, I think is gone out there, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're take those nets off.
Yeah.
Let the plants breathe and get some sunlight.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a question on, I have a blueberry question, I guess. Shall I do that?
Sure.
Let's see where the blueberry. Do you have the pictures up of that blueberry shrub?
I think Bev will have them up there.
Okay,
yeah.
great. So my blueberry shrub has some withered berries and insect infestations. I cut off all affected branches and it seems to be doing a little better. What insects are these and what other measures should I take to keep them off the plant? Well, that looks like our friends the cicadas damaged that blueberry branch and those leaf rollers there. I think the leaf rollers that are caterpillars that feed on the young leaves of many different species of shrubs and trees, including apples and blueberries. Those young caterpillars use silk to tie 2 or 3 leaves together. That's what they do, those rolls, typically at the tips of the branches. In addition to feeding on leaves, leaf rollers will eat green or ripe fruit near leaves with webbing. There are at least 3 species of leaf rollers that feed on blueberry leaves up north in Minnesota, and I don't know how many we have here. I don't know, Steve or Donna, if you know, but I would imagine we'd have probably similar amounts. I think at this point, the best thing to do is, with this cicada-related thing, is to cut away as you did what was bothering the plant and get it exposed to sunlight. I think it may be too late for that to fruit right now, isn't it, Steve? So I think...
they've already flowered probably.
Yeah, I think we're done with that. We'll wait till next year. Send us an update and send us a picture of your cleaned up, good-looking blueberry tree.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have time for any more questions?
Oh yeah, I think we got a time for at least one more. Yeah.
Okay. I've got a question here on Serviceberry plant. The writer is attaching pictures of plants in their garden and wondering if anyone has a clue as to what the problems are. The Serviceberry tree was planted last year and seems to be dying. Just planted last year. I have no idea what happened to it. Donna, any idea that you might have on that?
So without being on site and, kind of really taking a look at it, some things come to mind. I would ask what time of year it got planted. So if you're doing any really late fall planting, it doesn't give the tree that much time to establish. So when spring rolls around, you almost need to, jump on that watering and treat it like it's newly planted in the springtime. So that was one thought. There are a couple other things that can cause whole tree decline, from a very new installation. And one would be the depth of the installed plant, like if it got planted a little too deep. You put an inch or 2 of soil on an existing root ball and you end up smothering that air exchange for the roots. And that can just give that whole tree that total decline look like the photo's showing. And the only other thing I can think of is if the root ball was actually damaged. So, it's a little tricky with B&B stock, and I don't know whether that was or not, removing the burlap and the wire if necessary, and handling that root ball. If you break it, again, you disrupt a lot of that root system. So those are 3 things that came to mind when I saw the tree. I couldn't see that it would have any kind of disease or anything, since it looked like the leaves just never got there, right?
Yeah.
Steve may have other thoughts.
No, I think Donna's right, and that since it's a new plant, it really to pick up a lot of foliar diseases in one season, so it's probably something more recent, something the plant just didn't failed to get established.
Does this also have to do with putting the right plant in the right place?
It could be, Rob. It could be.
So do you think that's all about 1:15? Is that all we have time for today? I can just do a couple of announcements.
Just a few announcements.
Yeah, I do just have a few. I would really urge everyone, if you submit questions, again with photographs, go to our link. I think it's posted up here. Please enter as much detail as possible. Photos are most welcome and are so important, as you can hear by our answers. You see by looking at the questions and trying to understand what we're talking about. Cutoff for inclusion in the next session of In the Garden is July 16th at 6 p.m. The questions will be answered live Tuesday, July 20th at noon. Please include your email in case we need to follow up, and we will make every effort and attempt to answer your questions on the air. But if we run out of time on the show, we'll provide you with an answer by email. Any questions in the comments, Bev, or anything we need to cover? Shady clay backyard.
Well, I think Donna mentioned a couple. She had some of her favorites. I think a lot of it's how much traffic is, how much, some of this can handle a little bit if it's excessive. But I think Donna mentioned, right, I love the Pacra. I think maybe, and then there's that Pacra. There's actually a couple species within that genus. There's one that handles a little more dryness to it. You sometimes get. There's what the conditions again, Bev? It was
shady clay, I think.
Shady clay. Clay.
There's a lot of like Carex pennsylvanica. There's a great resources online to look up lawn alternatives. But with anything in our clay, depending on the amount of clay, you may need to amend to get these plants to do their best. But clay is important as a component in the soil for sure. So just adding maybe some compost before you plant. But yeah, look up a lot of those Carex species, Carex cultivars.
Different shapes and sizes, yeah.
Yeah, there's many different options when you get the Carex. It's one of the largest plant genuses in the plant kingdom. So there's all kinds of options there. So yeah, those were maybe a couple ideas there.
Good. Well, thank you, Donna and Steve. Thank you, Bev, for the question, and thank you, person who sent it in. So again, thank you, Donna Evans, and Steve Dubik for being our experts today. And thanks to all the researchers who this week were Sheila, Elise, Layla, Leslie, Pamela, and Susan. And thank all of you for joining us. As I said, the next In the Garden program will be July 20th, 2 weeks at noon. And any questions that you have, please contact us at the link on the screen by 6 p.m. on July 16th. See you again soon in the garden. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.